12,800 years ago, there's a massive global plunge in global temperatures, and the world suddenly gets as cold at the peak of the Ice Age.
12,800 years ago, the last ice age was ending. The Earth was becoming habitable again. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, and other Ice Age animals were starting to take over the land. But then, almost overnight, the planet snapped back into bitter cold again. And for decades, scientists have been trying to figure out why. However, recently, an international team of 26 scientists spent years studying the Younger Dryas layer, a thin line in the Earth's sediments dating back to this exact moment. They examined it grain by grain, testing every possible explanation and challenging every major theory. What they found has fueled one of the most controversial scientific debates of the last 18 years. This is the story of that strange layer of dirt and why it may hold the key to one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Let's get into it. The world that vanished. To understand why one thin layer of dirt is so important, we need to go back 14,000 years. At that time, the last ice age was coming to an end. Massive ice sheets covering much of North America and northern Europe were slowly melting away. Forests were spreading north. Herds of enormous animals such as woolly mammoths, dire wolves, and giant ground sloths were slowly starting to fill the land. For thousands of years, the trend was steady. The planet was warming. Then something unexpected happened. Around 12,800 years ago, that long warming trend suddenly stopped. Instead of getting warmer, the northern hemisphere became colder again, and it happened surprisingly fast. In Greenland, temperatures dropped by several degrees Celsius in only a few decades. Glaciers that had been shrinking started advancing once more. After thousands of years of gradual warming, the climate seemed to hit the brakes almost overnight. Scientists call this cold period the Younger Dryas. The name comes from a small Arctic flower called Dryas octopetala, whose pollen appears in sediments from this unusually cold era. What makes the Younger Dryas so mysterious is not just that it happened, but how quickly it happened. The Earth had spent thousands of years recovering from the Ice Age, yet something interrupted that recovery in a remarkably short period of time. And the climate was not the only thing that changed. At almost the exact same time, North America experienced one of the largest extinction events in its history. Mammoths disappeared, mastodons vanished, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and many other large animals suddenly dropped out of the fossil record. The scale of the loss was enormous. Scientists estimate that North America lost around 35 genera of large mammals during this narrow window of time. Entire groups of animals that had survived for millions of years simply disappeared. But the mystery does not end with the animals. Around this same period, archaeologists believe an entire human culture also vanished. And that is where the story becomes even more fascinating. The people who vanished. Archaeologists call them the Clovis people, named after a town in New Mexico where their distinctive tools were first discovered. The Clovis culture is best known for one remarkable invention, a carefully crafted stone spear point with a long groove carved down the center. These points were incredibly effective hunting tools. In fact, Clovis points have been found across most of North America, from coast to coast, showing just how widespread this culture once was. For generations, the Clovis way of life remained largely unchanged. Their survival depended on hunting the giant animals of the Ice Age. But then, the world around them began to change. As the Younger Dryas cooling event began around 12,800 years ago, many of those giant animals started disappearing. The very animals that had supported Clovis life for centuries were suddenly vanishing from the landscape. And as those animals disappeared, something else happened. The classic Clovis toolkit also began to disappear from the archaeological record. A hunting technology built for giant Ice Age animals suddenly had fewer and fewer targets. So now the mystery was growing larger. First, there was the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to near Ice Age conditions after thousands of years of warming. Second, there was a massive extinction event that wiped out many of North America's largest animals. And third, there was the disappearance of the Clovis culture, one of the continent's most widespread human populations. 3 major events, all happening within the same narrow window of time. For decades, scientists struggled to explain how these seemingly different events could be connected. And that is when they discovered something unexpected buried in the soil itself. A thin layer of material that appeared across multiple sites and seemed to link all 3 mysteries together. The line across time. For decades, archaeologists digging at Ice Age sites across the American Southwest had been noticing a pattern. Excavators digging downward through the soil would hit a dark, almost charcoal-colored band of sediment. A respected geoscientist named C. Vance Haynes spent years documenting this layer, site after site. He gave it a plain, unglamorous name: the black mat. The black mat is rich in organic material, which is part of why it is so dark. But the strange part is what surrounds it. Dig below the black mat, and you find the remains of extinct giant animals and Clovis spear points. Dig into it and above it, and those things are simply gone. The big animals do not reappear. The Clovis tools do not reappear. The black mat behaves like a line drawn across time itself, with a teeming Ice Age world sealed on one side and a strangely emptied landscape on the other. That alone would be a fascinating mystery. But in 2007, physicist Richard Firestone and a group of scientists proposed a new, more dramatic theory. Their paper was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This is an important detail because this is one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. A claim published somewhere obscure gets ignored. A claim this unconventional landed in a venue that scientists could not simply wave away. This is exactly what turned the idea into an instant global controversy. Their claim? The Younger Dryas was triggered by a cosmic event. A comet, an asteroid, or more likely a cluster of fragments came down from space. They either struck the ice sheet or exploded into fragments above the northern hemisphere. The energy released, they argued, would have ignited wildfires and destabilized the ice, throwing debris into the upper atmosphere and helping tip the warming climate back into deep cold. The black mat, in this telling, was partly the residue of that catastrophe. This became known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. From the moment it appeared, it was one of the most fiercely contested ideas in earth science. Publishing that claim in one of the most respected journals in science guaranteed one thing: every serious researcher in the field would have to actually look at the evidence instead of dismissing it. So they did. And what they found under the microscope is where this story gets genuinely difficult to explain away. What the microscope found. A claim is only as good as its evidence. So what were researchers actually pulling out of that black layer? The first were tiny spheres. When researchers process boundary sediment, they recover microscopic magnetic and carbon-rich spherules, beads of material that form when something is heated to extreme temperatures and then cools fast enough to freeze into a sphere shape. You get this kind of material from big impacts and other high-energy events. A scattering of them might mean nothing. A concentrated spike precisely at the boundary, with far fewer above and below it, is harder to dismiss. Then there were nanodiamonds, a rare hexagonal form associated with the shock pressures and temperatures generated by cosmic impacts. Diamonds normally require staggering pressure and heat to form, finding them concentrated in one thin layer and dated to the same event. This is the kind of clue that is genuinely hard to explain with ordinary geological processes. Researchers also found melted glass at several sites. By their chemistry, they appear to have formed at temperatures far hotter than any ordinary wildfire or volcanic process could produce. We are talking about heat extreme enough to melt rock and sand into glass. Any one of these findings, on its own, can be argued away. Spherules can form through other processes. Nanodiamonds have alternative explanations. Skeptics pointed this out immediately, but proponents kept returning to the same argument. One of the most cited examples comes from Abu Huraira in Syria. Syria is one of the earliest known sites of settled human village life and early farming anywhere on Earth. Researchers studying the soil there reported the same finding. Melted glass, fused at extreme temperatures, embedded in the ground of an actual ancient settlement, not some remote, uninhabited stretch of wilderness. If that finding holds up, it means whatever happened 12,800 years ago was not confined to one region. It was not one strange material showing up in isolation. It was a whole suite of them, spiking together in the same thin layer, scattered across the world. And then scientists found the one thing that all but cemented the theory: platinum. The platinum signature. Platinum is rare in Earth's crust, but relatively common in certain kinds of cosmic material, like asteroids and comets. A large extraterrestrial object vaporized in the atmosphere or struck an ice sheet. That should leave behind a faint dusting of platinum settling across the landscape. In the Greenland ice core, known as GISP2, researchers found exactly that, a sharp anomaly, a sudden spike in platinum locked into the ice almost precisely at the onset of the Younger Dryas. A platinum spike at that exact depth is a timestamp. That spike was not just a Greenland curiosity. Later research reported finding the same platinum anomaly at the Younger Dryas boundary at numerous sites. The same chemical fingerprint at the same moment in time, showing up again and again across an entire continent. For the people building the impact case, platinum was the closest thing yet to a smoking gun. One more thread connects directly to the climate question, and it is written in soot. Researchers examined sediment and ice from around the world at the Younger Dryas onset. Several teams reported a sharp peak in markers of burning, charcoal, soot, and fine carbon residue, seemingly left behind when vast amounts of vegetation went up in flames. The fire signatures appeared on multiple continents at roughly the same time. Some studies described it as one of the most intense biomass burning episodes in the entire geological record of that era. Picture wildfires raging across a meaningful fraction of the planet's surface within a single narrow window. Proponents of the impact hypothesis argue that this is the missing link between a cosmic event and a global freeze. Enough smoke and soot in the upper atmosphere dims the sun. Less sunlight reaches the ground. The surface cools. Some researchers call this an impact winter. In that scenario, the comet does not need to cool the planet through brute force alone. It only has to set the world on fire and let the smoke finish the job. At this point, the pieces seem to be falling into place. But there was still one major problem. The hypothesis was missing the one piece of evidence most people would expect from an impact. Where was the crater? Hiawatha's false promise. Critics have been asking this question for years. It remained one of the strongest arguments against the hypothesis for a long time. Then, in 2018, researchers using NASA ice-penetrating radar in Greenland discovered something. Beneath the Hiawatha Glacier in northwest Greenland, there is a massive circular depression. It is 19 miles long and buried beneath a kilometer of ice. An impact crater, and a big one, located near a region of the North Atlantic that heavily influences the Northern Hemisphere's climate. The timing seemed almost too perfect. James Kennett, one of the leading voices behind the impact hypothesis, predicted the crater would date to exactly the Younger Dryas. It did not. In 2022, scientists used two independent dating methods: uranium-lead analysis on zircon crystals and argon isotope analysis on sand grains recovered from beneath the glacier. Both converged on the same number. The Hiawatha crater is approximately 58 million years old, not 12,800 years. 58 million years. The asteroid that carved it struck a temperate rainforest inhabited by crocodiles and hippo-like creatures. That is tens of millions of years before the world would see an ice sheet. Kennett, when confronted with the new dating, acknowledged that the team behind it had made a compelling case. The crater briefly looked like the smoking gun for the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, but it turned out to be one of the oldest impact structures ever dated on the planet. It is utterly unrelated to the mystery it seemed destined to solve. Hiawatha was a dead end. The impact hypothesis was back where it started. No confirmed crater, no direct proof, and a growing number of critics. But supporters argued that the strongest evidence had never been the crater. It was the mysterious layer itself. So instead of searching for a missing impact site, a team of 26 scientists decided to re-examine the boundary layer from the ground up, testing the boundary again. The leading conventional explanation for this sudden cooling does not involve a comet at all. It involves water. The great North American ice sheet melted and created an enormous lake of glacial meltwater. According to this model, at some point, a vast surge of that cold, fresh water suddenly drained into the North Atlantic. Fresh water is lighter than salt water, and dumping that much of it into the ocean could disrupt the great circulation system that carries warm water north and keeps the northern hemisphere mild. Shut that conveyor down, and northern temperatures plunge. No comet required. The extinctions have their own competing explanations, too. The overkill hypothesis argues that human hunters spreading across the Americas simply hunted the slow-breeding giants into extinction. Others point to the wild climate swings at the end of the Ice Age. A few researchers have floated disease as a contributing factor. This is the landscape 26 researchers had to work with. They undertook one of the most ambitious re-examinations the boundary layer has ever received. They put together expertise across geology, chemistry, and archaeology. The team went back to sites on multiple continents and reanalyzed the boundary. They were not testing any single piece of evidence in isolation. They were testing whether the strange signal held up under renewed scrutiny, site by site, material by material. What emerged was not one dramatic discovery, it was a pattern in the timing itself. The team carefully dated the boundary layer at widely separated sites on different continents. The layer kept falling into the same narrow window, right around 12,800 years ago. A statistical reanalysis of dates from multiple locations showed something extraordinary. The black layer is essentially synchronous in time across the northern hemisphere and beyond. Think about what that would mean. A wildfire is local, a flood is regional. A thin layer carrying the same exotic materials was deposited at the same time across the world. Synchronous, continent-spanning, and impossible to explain with anything happening purely on the ground. That finding did not just support the hypothesis, it forced a different question entirely. Not whether something fell from the sky 12,800 years ago, but what kind of object could leave a mark this widespread. What really happened? Researchers have stopped picturing a single giant meteorite. The running theory is that a large comet had broken apart long before reaching Earth, leaving behind a stream of fragments and debris. A planet crossing through that stream would not take one hit. It would take a barrage, multiple air bursts and impacts, scattered across the globe, all within a very short span of time. That picture ties the threads together in a way a single impact never could. It explains the melted glass found thousands of miles apart. It explains the spherules turning up on different continents. It explains why there is still no single crater anyone can point to. An air burst from a fragmented body leaves behind atmospheric devastation without leaving a hole in the ground. And it also explains why the boundary shows up everywhere researchers look. So has the debate actually ended? Here is the honest answer to where things stand. The evidence has not faded under 26 independent sets of eyes. It has accumulated. The platinum spike held up under reanalysis. The melted glass kept turning up at new sites. The synchronized dating across continents kept tightening with each fresh pass through the data. The collection of impact markers sealed in that thin black boundary has only grown harder to wave away as coincidence. An idea that was once treated as a conspiracy theory has become the focal point of the conversation. For a growing number of researchers working on this specific question, the framing has shifted. It is no longer simply whether something cosmic happened at the dawn of the Younger Dryas. It is how large the event was, and how much of the resulting catastrophe it can actually explain. What started as a fringe idea 18 years ago has been pushed to the center stage. There have been repeated attempts to disprove it, but each new piece of evidence only strengthens it. So, what do you think? Did a cosmic impact really end the Ice Age world of mammoths and Clovis hunters? Or was something else behind their disappearance? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.